So this was a very big week at the Capitol for education advocates who are seeking restoration of funding cuts proposed by Governor Cuomo. Yesterday, we saw 1,500 parents, teachers, kids, and community activists. They stormed the Capitol, calling for the extension of the millionaire's tax to offset reduction in state aid. Today brought yet another rally that focused on maintaining the state's support for schools for the disabled. These so-called 4201 schools are poised to lose some $100 million, with the cost of educating high-needs kids transferred to local districts. Now, opponents say that that will result in higher property taxes and fewer services. So joining us now to talk more about this are two school leaders who will feel the pain if this goes through. Deborah Arliss is the head of the St. Joseph School for the Deaf in the Bronx, and then across the table we see Patrice Kunstler. She is the executive director of the Henry Viscardi School on Long Island. Did I get that right?
You got it.
Okay,
exactly
good.
Right.
So if you guys would just sort of quickly encapsulate what kind of kids we're talking about. We're really talking about kids that have high needs, correct? And not easily mainstreamed is just the bottom line.
Across all the 11 4201 schools, we deal with very low incidence disabilities. It's called low incidence disabilities, blind, deaf, and physically challenged students. So our schools seem to be small, but the needs are very, very high.
Okay.
They're the most difficult children to provide services for.
Right, right.
So students in our case, the physically disabled students, medical sciences having more and more students with physical challenges being able to respond to early, low birth weight children and things of that nature. We have children who come to our school who come on ambulances to come to school because they cannot be sustained on a school bus. So they have trachs and they have ambu bags in the event that their trachs malfunction. On a regular basis, we have 4 full-time nurses. They do 70 or so medical procedures a day, including tube feeding, catheterizations, suctioning, O2 level monitors. We have kids who need their O2 level monitored before they get on the bus, when they get off the bus, certain times during the day, every week.
So that's why we're talking about. Now, there's an op-ed that the budget director has written. That would be Bob Megna. It's going to appear in a newspaper tomorrow. That's why you're talking about average tuition of about $93,000. I mean, you're not talking about. Well, is that number actually correct?
We haven't actually heard a number, but I will say that number sounds relatively high. I think that certainly in a school like ours, we have a lot of high needs kids. On the IEPs, we see an increase in related services that are necessary for students. We have students who need physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. They need the services of a hearing specialist, a vision teacher in our school. We have very high
and the newest trend that we're seeing in the last number of years is that in our schools with the deaf kids is that they're coming in with deafness as their primary disability, handicapping condition. That's why they're placed in the school for the deaf, but they also have these secondary autism, learning disabilities, other kinds of special needs.
Okay, so to be clear though, what we're saying is the state doesn't want to stop funding schools totally and shut them down. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a change in the way the funding would be allocated. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. It's the change in the way the cash flows, and that's what's being shifted to the local school districts. The state is saying we're no longer going to have that money come directly to the schools as we've been funded for the last almost 200 years.
Well, and basically what they'll do is they'll have us send a bill to the school district for the student who attends our school, and then we'll have to collect from the school district.
But at the same time that the school districts are being told you might actually have to live under a property tax cap, which is the main funding stream for public school districts. So they're going to have these high needs kids, what you're talking about, whatever the number might be. You say he says $93,000. You guys say that's high. It's a number that's higher than your average student, right?
Yes.
These kids are now going to have to be the responsibility of school districts at the same time that the school districts are going to have less ability to raise revenue. Correct. That's what you're arguing.
That's correct. And what a school district is going to be forced to decide is, do we send them out, continue to send them out to these specialized schools at a tuition rate, or because they can't afford that, that's not going to be their first choice, is do we keep them in district and educate them, and that's going to lead to a myriad of environments that probably will underserve them.
Like what, for example? I mean, what would be...
When you have a deaf student, when you have a deaf school, you have a critical mass at any grade level. When you put those kids back into their local school districts, they then get dispersed throughout. There's not the critical mass, that's gone. The language environment they need to learn in is gone. They're probably being put in a classroom with an interpreter, so now there's a third party to go through. So the direct communication
I
is
was
gone.
going to say, today we heard a lot of children who were talking about not having a third party interpret for them when they are with their friends. And I mean, in all of our schools, we think that kids have a right to go to school with their peer group. And they need to learn about their disabilities. They need to learn about the individuals who have blindness, deafness, or a physical disability.
If they want to, right? I mean, if you want to
Sure.
mainstream your kid, you can do that.
Absolutely.
That's what David Patterson's parents
Absolutely.
did. And they chose that for him. They wanted
Absolutely.
him to go to school on Long Island,
Right.
and that is something that they wanted. Then you have another argument to say that not doing that is having a peer group of kids. The thing is that
And that's the right of special ed law. That's federal law, that
Right.
you should have a continuum of services, and what's going to disappear are these choices of these schools.
So would it then, do you think, lead to a lawsuit if that?
Absolutely.
I see. Okay. So not all schools, though. I mean, this is what the budget director says. There's 11 of these schools.
Right.
Not all schools that serve kids that have needs like this are receiving this kind of special funding. 4201 is a special class of schools.
It's a special section of the law.
So what's the argument for not having everybody receive the same kind of treatment, every school receiving the same kind of treatment? Because that's what you guys are advocating, to continue.
Every school within the 4201 system, the 11 schools?
No, in other words, for all of the 100-plus special education schools in the state, which is what the budget director is
Right.
saying, why can't you guys all be treated like these other people? Why should you have a specialized class of special treatment?
I think that part of the issue is that a lot of these schools who are funded under a rate-setting methodology have had a lot of difficulty. You can appeal your rate, but if you take 5 years to grieve it, so to speak, you can wind up in a difficult financial situation. It's not that expenses are getting lower. We have technology needs that our schools have that are very critical for our children. Technology can level the playing field, but it takes a lot of ingenuity to create switches and on-screen keyboards and things of that nature that kids need. So, it's an issue.
And the other piece to that is that the rate-setting methodology has been around for about 30 years or so and has been broken for 30 years. That's a well-known fact within the legislators. We have tremendous support for the appropriation methodology that we currently are under, because they know all the problems that have been true for all the special act schools that are rate set.
So the reception that you received when you spoke to legislators today was positive.
Very positive.
Very positive.
Very encouraging.
They were
day for us.
wonderful and very big supporters. And
See, the only problem, though, is $100 million is not a lot of money when you talk about a budget of the size that we're talking about
Right.
here, right? And education, of course, is a major part of the funding for a budget. However, 100 million here and 100 million there and 100 million, and we're talking about real money, right? So
And
you're
we
up
wanna-
against that.
Right, and we're here to say we want to be part of the solution. Don't just take us out of the conversation altogether, because that's what the
Right.
proposal has on the table right now. It's just really this blanket statement of we are no longer, as the experts, going to be part of that evaluation process or the discussion with the families and the committees on special education that are in charge of the assessment and placement of these students. We are being taken out of the mix altogether. We're saying let us be in the mix, let us stay at the table to come up with a solution. Everybody needs to help the state find money. We can do that too as 4201 schools, but we don't need to change the funding mechanism to do that.
Okay, well, unfortunately we're out of time, but it's obviously an issue that you guys feel passionately about, and that the kids, I think, feel particularly passionately about
they were
it too.
wonderful today.
Well, I want to thank you, Patrice Kunstler, thank you, and Deborah Arliss, thank you very much. I appreciate
Very
it.
much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it.